Victoria Ashford's heels clicked against marble in sharp, urgent rhythm. 8:47. The meeting with the Japanese investors started at 9:15, and the 2:10 to downtown would be merciless at this hour. "Marina, I have to go," she called out, adjusting her blazer while mentally reviewing her presentation. The nurse waved from the living room where she prepared Margaret's morning medications. Victoria reached her car, pulled the handle, locked. Her hand dove into her purse. Wallet, phone, lipstick, pen. No keys. They were upstairs, on the nightstand. She'd taken them off to grab her perfume and she ran back inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite her heels protesting. Second floor, West Wing. She grabbed the keys from her dresser and turned to leave when she heard it. Laughter. Her mother's laughter. Victoria froze. How long had it been? 6 months? A year? Since she'd heard Margaret laugh like that. Genuine, light, alive. The sound came from downstairs, from Margaret's room. Something twisted in Victoria's chest. Marina should be giving her mother a bath right now. The routine was sacred. Bath at 8:30, breakfast at 9, medication at 9:30. Victoria paid a fortune to ensure that precision. So why was her mother laughing? She descended slowly now, each step measured. Her mother's suite was on the ground floor. Easier access, safer. Victoria had personally overseen the renovation 3 years ago when the diagnosis came. Private bathroom, hospital bed, monitoring systems, and a sunroom with glass doors opening to the rose garden. The bedroom door stood ajar. Victoria approached in silence. What she saw through the gap hit her like a physical blow. Margaret sat at the small table in her sunroom, morning light gilding her silver hair. And she wasn't alone. A man sat across from her, the gardener. Victoria recognized the work shirt, the muddy boots still on his feet, the weathered hands holding a coffee cup as if he belonged there. Daniel, that was his name. She'd hired him maybe 2 years ago. Just another employee on a long list of people who kept the property running. But he shouldn't be here. Not in her mother's bedroom. Not sitting at her table like an invited guest. Not making Margaret laugh like old friends. Robert was right. The thought came sharp and bitter. Her brother always warned her about trusting staff too much, about maintaining appropriate boundaries. He'd tell me to fire him immediately, say I was negligent, let a stranger take advantage of Mom. Heat flushed through Victoria, not just anger, shame, fear, and something sharper she didn't want to name, jealousy. Through the door she heard them talking. Margaret's voice was clear, clearer than Victoria had heard it in months. And then the boy said he wanted to be an astronaut, Daniel was saying, his voice carrying a soft Latin accent Victoria had never really noticed before. But he was afraid of heights. My brother didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Margaret laughed again, that crystalline sound belonging to a woman Victoria barely recognized. Children are wonderful, aren't they? So honest, so full of impossible dreams. Like you, Donna Margaret, Daniel said with genuine affection that made Victoria's stomach clench. You told me yesterday you dreamed of having a lavender garden. It's never too late for dreams. Yesterday, the words sliced through her. This has been going on long enough for them to reference yesterday? You're very kind to me, Margaret said, warmth flooding her voice. I don't know why, but you remind me of someone good. I should be that someone, Victoria thought, the pain sharp and familiar. I'm her daughter. I should be the one making her smile like that. Victoria pushed the door hard enough to make it bang against the wall. Both turned sharply. Daniel stood so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood. His eyes widened. Not with guilt, Victoria noted furiously, but with genuine surprise, like a child caught doing something he didn't know was wrong. And Margaret looked at Victoria with that expression that was a knife to the heart every single time. Polite, confused, the superficial courtesy offered to strangers interrupting a pleasant moment. Oh, Margaret said, blinking, her smile fading. Hello, do you need something? But Victoria wasn't looking at her mother, her eyes fixed on Daniel. And if looks could burn, he'd be ash. My mother's bedroom, Victoria said, her voice low and dangerous, each word surgical. She could hear Robert's voice in her head. Fire him. Now, before it's too late. You're in my mother's bedroom. Explain. Now. Fresh coffee scent hung in the air, rich, strong, completely out of place. On the table, Victoria saw 2 porcelain cups, Margaret's good china, not everyday dishes, a French press that definitely didn't belong in this room, and something that made her stomach turn. an open notebook beside Daniel, covered in careful handwriting. He was taking notes about her mother in her bedroom. Robert's going to lose it when he hears about this, Victoria thought, already mentally composing the call she'd make to Boston as soon as she left. Mrs. Ashford, I can explain, Daniel began, his hands rising in a placating gesture, accent more pronounced now, a sign of nerves. You have 10 seconds, Victoria cut him off, before I call security. 10 seconds to tell me why you're in my mother's bedroom, serving coffee in our fine china like you have any right to be here. Margaret, confused by the sudden tension poisoning the air, looked between them. Don't be rude to the young man, dear. He was just being kind. I was sitting alone in the sunroom and the fact that her mother called her dear, a generic term for strangers, but defended Daniel, a gardener she should barely know, and spoke in complete, coherent sentences with him when she could barely string 2 words together with her own daughter, that broke something inside Victoria into sharp pieces. Outside, she said to Daniel, her voice shaking with contained rage and something dangerously close to tears she would never shed in front of an employee. Now, as Daniel walked toward the door, passing Victoria with the care of someone passing a dangerous animal, she followed him with her eyes, cataloging every detail. The dirty boots that had walked on her Persian rug, the hands that had held her mother's cups, the notebook he discreetly closed and took with him. Evidence, Victoria thought, her corporate attorney mind engaging. He's taking evidence. Victoria looked once more at Margaret, who'd already returned to gazing out the sunroom window, the moment evaporating from her fragile mind like mist under sun. But the smile still remained on her lips, the smile that stranger had put there, the smile Victoria, with all her money and power and desperate love, couldn't make appear anymore. And that, more than anything else, more than the privacy invasion or protocol breach, was what hurt most. Robert will say I'm weak for hesitating, Victoria thought, as she followed Daniel outside. Say I'm letting emotion cloud professional judgment. And maybe he's right. The garden path crunched under Victoria's heels, each step fueled by a rage she hadn't felt since closing her last hostile takeover. Daniel walked ahead, shoulders tense but not cowering. That irritated her too, his refusal to properly grovel. They reached the side yard, away from windows. Victoria crossed her arms, assuming the posture that intimidated men in boardrooms. How long has this been happening? Daniel turned to face her, his expression calm, respectful, but not intimidated. If you're referring to the coffee, ma'am, about 8 months. 8 months. Victoria's laugh had no humor in it. You're telling me that for 8 months you've been entering my home sitting with my mother like your family? With respect, ma'am, it's not like that. Then what is it like? Victoria's voice rose. You take advantage of a sick, vulnerable woman, create some kind of proximity to get into her will, get more money. She saw hurt flash through his eyes, but Daniel kept his voice steady. Your mother was sitting alone in her sunroom for over an hour, ma'am. Every morning when I arrived to work, just sitting, staring out the window. One day I asked if she wanted company while I had my coffee before starting in the garden. She said yes. That's all. That's all, Victoria repeated, her voice bitter. And you expect me to believe you do this out of pure goodness? That you want nothing in return? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, but no less firm. My grandmother had Alzheimer, ma'am. I know what it's like. I know how they get trapped inside their own minds, scared and alone. If I can give Donna Margaret 20 minutes a day where she's not alone, where she smiles, I don't need anything in return. That's already enough. Victoria felt her defenses waver, but jealousy and pain were stronger than reason. You're fired. Get your things and leave my property now. Victoria! Marina's voice came from the back door. The nurse rarely used her employer's first name, which made Victoria realize the gravity. Marina descended the steps quickly, her face worried. Please, can we talk for a moment? There's nothing to discuss. Your mother hasn't eaten for 2 days when Daniel doesn't come, Marina said quickly, words tumbling out. She waits for him every morning, gets agitated, anxious. When he arrives, she calms down. He's the only person she consistently recognizes. Doctor, Chen said these connections are rare in patients at her stage. They're precious. Victoria looked from Marina to Daniel, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. She'd built her entire life on control, on making the right choices, on protecting those she loved. Now she was being confronted with the possibility that despite all her money and power, a gardener could give her mother something she couldn't. Please, Daniel said quietly, and there was dignity in his voice that touched something in Victoria. "Can I show you something? If after that you still want me to leave, I'll go. No problem." Victoria wanted to say no, wanted to maintain her anger, her righteous indignation, but there was something in his eyes. No malice, no manipulation, just quiet honesty impossible to ignore. "What?" she asked, her voice tired. "My notebooks," Daniel answered. "I record our conversations. Every morning. I thought, maybe it could be important someday. For you." Victoria stared at him, her mind racing. Robert would tell me this is a trap, would say he's manipulating me. But Robert wasn't here, hadn't been here in over a year, and Victoria had just heard her mother laugh for the first time in months. "Fine," she said finally. "Show me." Daniel retrieved a worn backpack from his truck and pulled out 3 composition notebooks, the cheap kind students use, covers stained with garden dirt and coffee rings. "The gazebo might be better," Marina suggested, glancing toward the house. "More private." Victoria followed them to the structure near the artificial lake, conscious that her designer suit felt absurd in this setting. She sat on the wooden bench and accepted the first notebook Daniel offered. "I started writing because my therapist suggested it," Daniel explained, his voice low. "After my grandmother died, I carried a lot of guilt, felt I should have spent more time with her, recorded her stories. So when I began having coffee with Donna Margaret, I decided to write, for you, so you'd have something when she—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Victoria opened the notebook with trembling hands. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, like someone for whom English was a second language. The first entry was dated 8 months ago, March 15th. "Today I sat with Donna Margaret for the first time. She was in her sunroom looking at the garden. I asked if I could keep her company. She said, 'Oh yes, please, it's so quiet here.' We talked about flowers. She said she likes lilies because her mother planted lilies. She smiled when I told her about my nephew Miguel, said I have a nice voice and should sing more." Victoria turned the page, then another. Each entry was a small window. Conversations about weather, about birds, about recipes Margaret vaguely remembered. Nothing profound, nothing extraordinary, just small moments of human connection. Then Victoria reached an entry that made her heart stop. April 2nd. "Donna Margaret talked about her daughter today. She doesn't know it's you, Mrs. Ashford, but she remembers feelings. She said, 'I had a beautiful daughter. I don't think I was the mother she needed. I was always too hard, too demanding. I was so afraid she'd be weak like I was. Now I don't know where she is.' She cried a little. I held her hand, told her I was sure her daughter loved her very much. She said, 'I hope so. I hope she knows I always loved her, even when I didn't know how to show it.'" Victoria felt tears burn her eyes. She fought to contain them, but one escaped, running down her carefully made-up face. She wiped it quickly, knowing Daniel had seen. "Keep going," he said gently. "There's more." There was. Much more. Childhood stories Victoria had forgotten. The day she fell off her bicycle and Margaret held her all night. The time Victoria won a school award and Margaret cried with pride. Fragmented memories of a father who worked too much and was always absent, and a mother who tried to compensate alone. May 28th. Donna Margaret was anxious today. Kept saying she needed to pick someone up from school. I gently explained she didn't need to worry, but she was very agitated. So I asked about this person. She said, "My girl. She's waiting for me. She always waits, and I'm always late because I have to work. She stands there alone." Cried a lot. Said she felt like a terrible mother. I said I bet her daughter understands. Bet she's proud to have a mother who worked so hard. Donna Margaret said, "You think so? Sometimes I wonder if she knows everything I did was for her." Victoria closed the notebook, unable to continue. Her vision blurred, her chest tight. She remembered those days, waiting at school after all the other children had left, watching the sun set, trying not to cry. And when Margaret finally arrived, exhausted and guilty, Victoria never said anything, just stored that loneliness deep inside where it grew and transformed into fierce determination to be different, to be successful, to never depend on anyone. "Why did you do this?" Victoria asked, her voice cracked. "Why do you care so much?" Daniel was quiet, looking at the lake. "When my grandmother was sick, I had 2 jobs. Worked mornings and nights. Visited her on Sundays, maybe an hour, 2 at most. Thought I was doing enough because I paid for her medications, made sure she had food. But when she died," he took a deep breath, "the nurses told me she talked about me every day, that she waited for me, and I showed up once a week. She didn't want my money. She wanted my presence. Victoria sat in her car outside the mansion, phone in hand, staring at Robert's contact. The meeting with the investors was long forgotten. Her assistant had sent 3 increasingly frantic messages. She ignored them all. Her brother answered on the second ring. "Vic, isn't it kind of early out there?" "Robert, I need your opinion on something." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "If it's about Mom, you know I trust your judgment completely. You're there. You know what's best. But this is different. The gardener, he's been spending time with her. A lot of time. Having coffee, talking." "Wait." Robert's tone shifted. "The gardener? An employee has private access to our mother? He seems genuine. And Mom, she responds to him in ways she doesn't respond to." "Victoria, listen to yourself. A stranger is taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. Our mother has Alzheimer. She can't consent to this kind of intimacy. It's not like that. He keeps notebooks where he records." "Notebooks?" Robert interrupted. "He's documenting her?" "Victoria, that's worse. You need to protect Mom. You need to protect her estate, our inheritance." Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. "When was the last time you visited her, Robert?" Silence. Then, "That's not relevant. I call every week. You call Marina, not Mom. When were you actually here? Christmas? 6 months ago? I have responsibilities. My kids, my practice. Unlike you, I have a family too." He caught himself, tried to recover. "What I mean is I can't just drop everything." "Right." Victoria's voice went flat. "So I should take advice from someone who hasn't seen her in half a year? Look, don't let guilt cloud your judgment. Fire this man. Today. Before he manipulates Mom somehow. Or worse. Worse how? Victoria, think. A Hispanic man, probably undocumented, with access to a wealthy woman with dementia? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Fire him and hire proper security if you need to." Victoria closed her eyes. Robert's words echoed her own initial fears, gave shape to her anger, but they also revealed something she hadn't wanted to see. Her brother viewed their mother as an asset to protect, not a person to love. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Don't think too long. Make the hard decision. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Being the executor of Mom's estate means executing." After hanging up, Victoria sat in silence. Through the car window, she could see Daniel in the garden, trimming roses with careful precision. Margaret's room faced that garden. Had her mother watched him work? Was that how this started? Victoria opened her door with purpose. She'd go out there, do what needed to be done. Robert was right. She was good at hard decisions. She'd built an empire on them. But as she walked toward the garden, Robert's words kept echoing. Execute. Protect the estate. Our inheritance. When had they stopped talking about their mother as a person? Daniel saw her approaching and straightened, setting down his shears. His expression was resigned, like he'd been expecting this. "Mrs. Ashford, I need you to—" Victoria began, then stopped. Behind Daniel, barely visible through the trees, she saw something that made her breath catch. A small clearing she didn't remember being there. Flowers arranged in a deliberate pattern, and in the center, weathered but cared for, a simple wooden cross. "What is that?" she asked, pointing. Daniel turned, following her gaze. Something shifted in his expression, uncertainty mixing with hope. "Come see," he said quietly. "Please, before you decide." Victoria followed Daniel through a path she didn't recognize, though she'd lived here 3 years. Oleander bushes formed a natural corridor, opening into a circular clearing perhaps 15 feet across. Her breath caught. A simple wooden bench sat beneath an old oak tree. Lily bulbs, freshly planted, ringed the space, and mounted on the oak's trunk, a cross made from weathered wood, clearly salvaged and restored. "I had this removed," Victoria whispered, "during the renovation. Mom used to come here every morning before Dad died. I thought it would upset her to see it and not remember why it mattered." "She remembered," Daniel said quietly. 3 weeks ago, she told me about a place where she used to talk to God, described it perfectly. The oak tree, the cross her husband made, the lilies. She said it was the only place she ever felt peace. Victoria's throat tightened. "So you rebuilt it?" "I tried. Used wood from the old garden shed for the cross. The bench was in storage. Marina helped me find it. The lilies won't bloom until spring, but—" "Danny?" A voice fragile but clear came from behind them. They turned. Marina was helping Margaret down the path, supporting her elbow. But Margaret's eyes were alert, focused in a way Victoria hadn't seen in over a year. Donna Margaret wanted to see the garden, Marina explained softly. She's been asking about it all morning. Margaret's gaze fixed on the clearing, and her entire face transformed. You brought it back, she said, tears spilling down her weathered cheeks. My place, you brought back my place. She moved forward without Marina's help, steady despite her age, and sank onto the bench. Her hands traced the armrest like reading Braille, remembering. I prayed here every morning, Margaret said, her voice stronger than Victoria had heard it in months. For my daughter, my Victoria. She looked up at Daniel. You did this for me? Yes, ma'am. Why? Daniel knelt in front of her, his muddy work pants pressing into the earth. Because you mentioned it mattered to you, and things that matter to you should exist. Margaret cupped his face with both hands, studying him. Then she began to sing, soft and slightly off-key. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Victoria's knees weakened. That voice, that song. She'd heard it 1,000 times as a child. Her mother's voice floating through their old house every morning before dawn. Margaret's eyes found Victoria, and for the first time in over a year there was recognition. Real, complete, devastating recognition. You're here, Margaret said. My baby's here. Victoria couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stand there as her mother extended a shaking hand. I prayed for you every morning in this spot, Margaret continued, tears flowing freely now. Prayed you'd stop running long enough to live, that you'd find someone who'd teach you to be still. Her gaze shifted to Daniel, then back to Victoria. I think he sent you both what you needed. Victoria finally moved, dropping to her knees beside Daniel, taking her mother's hand. The hand was cold, trembling, but it squeezed back. Actually squeezed back. I'm so sorry, Mama, Victoria choked out. I'm so sorry I took this away. Sorry I haven't been here. You're here now, Margaret said simply. That's what matters. Being here now. They stayed like that. 3 people in a clearing, sunlight filtering through oak leaves, the ghost of a hymn hanging in the air. Victoria watched her mother's face, memorizing this moment of clarity, knowing it could disappear as quickly as it came. When Margaret's eyes began to drift again, losing focus, Victoria didn't panic, didn't try to hold on to the moment past its time. She just stayed on her knees in the dirt, in her expensive suit, holding her mother's hand while Daniel quietly hummed the hymn Margaret had started. And for the first time in years, Victoria understood what presence actually meant. 2 days later, Victoria sat in Dr. Chen's office, hands folded in her lap like a student called to the principal. She'd rehearsed what to say during the drive over, but now the words felt inadequate. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Victoria began. Dr. Chen adjusted her glasses, expression unreadable. Your message said it was urgent. Is Margaret all right? That's what I need to understand. Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolled to find the right words. The gardener, Daniel. You know about him? Marina mentioned him in her reports. Said he's been beneficial to Margaret's routine. Beneficial? Victoria's laugh was hollow. Doctor, she sang. Yesterday in the garden, she sang a hymn from my childhood. She recognized me. Really recognized me, not just polite stranger recognition. And it's because of him. Dr. Chen leaned back, studying Victoria with the careful attention of someone reassessing a diagnosis. How long has this been happening? 8 months, apparently. 8 months of him sitting with her, talking with her, and I had no idea. Victoria's voice cracked. My brother thinks I should fire him. Says it's inappropriate, potentially dangerous. But yesterday when she looked at me, she couldn't finish. Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment, then opened Margaret's file. In 20 years treating Alzheimer patients, I can count on one hand how many times I've seen what I'm seeing with your mother. What do you mean? Patients at Margaret's stage rarely form new connections. The brain is locked. They might recognize familiar faces for a time, but eventually even that fades. New people? Nearly impossible. She pulled out a chart. But since this young man started spending time with her, appetite improved 35%. Sleep quality up. Significant reduction in agitation episodes. And this, she pointed to a graph, 3 documented moments of lucidity in 2 weeks. Before, 1 moment in 6 months. Victoria stared at the data, her business mind trying to reconcile emotion with evidence. So he's actually helping. Dr. Chen removed her glasses, her professional mask slipping. Mrs. Ashford, I'm going to step outside my role as a physician and speak as someone who lost her own mother to this disease. Victoria leaned forward. Alzheimer steals everything. memories, personality, dignity. But what I learned with my mother in her final months was that even when the mind goes, something remains. An essence, a capacity to feel love, safety, peace. She paused, emotional. I spent a fortune on treatments, the best specialists, experimental therapies. You know who made the most difference? A hospital cleaning lady who sang to my mother. Old gospel songs. My mother wasn't religious, but something in that human connection reached her when medicine couldn't. So you're saying, I'm saying that medically, I can't explain why your mother responds to this man, but as a doctor, I know to recognize when something works. And as a person, a small smile. My grandmother would say he's an angel sent at the right time. I'd say he's an extraordinarily compassionate human being who showed up when your mother needed him most. Victoria felt something unclench in her chest. My medical recommendation, don't interfere. Document these interactions. Be present during them when you can, and treasure every moment of lucidity your mother has, because they'll become rarer. And if my brother questions it, calls it inappropriate, Dr. Chen's expression hardened. Your brother visits once a year? Then with all respect, his opinion isn't medical, it's political. You're here. You see the results. Trust what you see, not what others judge from a distance. Victoria nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift she hadn't known she carried. One more thing, Dr. Chen added, consulting the file. I see you've gone from bi-weekly 20-minute visits to daily 2 to 3 hour visits. Victoria tensed, defensive. I know I should have done it sooner. I wasn't criticizing. I was congratulating. Dr. Chen's voice softened. Your mother's improving, not just because of the gardener. It's because you're present now. 3 months after the garden revelation, Victoria had restructured her entire life in ways that would have terrified her younger self. She worked from Margaret's sunroom most mornings, laptop balanced on her knees while her mother dozed nearby. Her executive team handled more autonomy than she'd ever allowed. The business didn't collapse. It actually improved. The coffee ritual with Daniel became sacred. Victoria learned to sit without fixing, to listen without solving, to exist in silence without discomfort. Margaret's lucid moments grew rarer, sometimes weeks apart, but Victoria stopped chasing them. She found value in the fog too, in just being present regardless of recognition. One October afternoon, Margaret was having a good day, not fully lucid, but more aware than usual. She sat between Victoria and Daniel in the garden, watching clouds drift past. You two spend a lot of time together, Margaret observed, a sly smile playing at her lips. Victoria glanced at Daniel, caught off guard. My daughter's alone, you know, Margaret continued, as if Victoria weren't sitting right there. Works too much. Forgets to live. She patted Daniel's hand. You seem like a good man. Patient. Kind. The kind who stays. Mama, Victoria said, embarrassed heat creeping up her neck. Margaret turned to her with surprising clarity. What? You think I don't notice? You light up different when he's around, less rigid, more you. Daniel studied his coffee with intense focus, but Victoria caught the slight smile tugging at his mouth. I'm just saying, Margaret continued, that mischievous tone Victoria remembered from childhood. Don't wait too long, life's short, and you've wasted enough time running. The moment passed, Margaret's attention drifting to a butterfly, but something hung in the air after. Unspoken, acknowledged, carefully set aside for a future neither wanted to examine too closely. December brought cold, unusual for Southern California. Margaret stopped eating. Dr. Chen came, examined her, then spoke with Victoria in the garden where this had all begun. Days, the doctor said gently. Maybe a week. I'm sorry. Victoria didn't panic, didn't search for other opinions or demand experimental treatments. She just nodded and said, Thank you for preparing us. She called Daniel. It's time, was all she said. He arrived in 20 minutes, dropping everything. They sat vigil together, Victoria on one side of Margaret's bed, Daniel on the other, Marina at the foot adjusting blankets with practiced tenderness. Margaret drifted in and out, sometimes present, sometimes distant, but she knew she wasn't alone. Victoria saw it in how her mother relaxed when she held her hand, how her lips curved in a small smile when she heard their voices. Tell her about the lilies, Daniel said softly to Victoria. Victoria leaned close, tears falling onto the pillow beside Margaret's face. The lilies we planted are going to bloom in spring, Mama. They came back, just like you said they would. No matter how cold the winter, they always come back. just like you taught me." Margaret opened her eyes, and for one last precious moment, Victoria saw recognition there, love there, peace there. "My beautiful girl," Margaret whispered. "You finally stopped running." "Yes," Victoria sobbed. "I finally stopped. You taught me. You and Daniel." Margaret looked at Daniel. "Take care of her. She forgets to take care of herself." "I will," Daniel promised. "No," Margaret corrected, her voice weakening. "Let her take care. Let her stay. That's the gift." Letting her love her way. Then, as gently as a leaf falling, Margaret closed her eyes. She breathed for 3 more hours, each breath more spaced than the last. Victoria stayed beside her, holding her hand, singing lullabies she didn't remember learning, but came naturally. When the end came, it was quiet, peaceful, surrounded by love. Victoria bent over her mother's body and finally allowed herself to cry, not just for the loss, but for everything gained, for the precious months where she'd learned to slow down, for the chance to truly know her mother before it was too late, for a humble gardener who cared enough to sit and have coffee with a lonely old woman. Daniel's hand rested on her shoulder, offering silent support. Marina wept softly, preparing Margaret with the dignity and love she deserved. And Victoria, for the first time in her life, didn't try to compose herself quickly, didn't try to be strong or efficient or in control. She just remained there in the moment, allowing herself to feel everything. The pain, the gratitude, the love, the loss, all simultaneously and completely. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the gazebo, looking out at the memorial garden she and Daniel had created. Spring had arrived in Pasadena, and the lilies were in full bloom, hundreds of them in shades of white, yellow, and pink. The house had been transformed into a care center for families dealing with Alzheimer's. Victoria had used her fortune and business expertise to create a space where patients could receive dignified care and where families could learn, as she had learned, that presence mattered more than any amount of money. Marina served as nursing director. Daniel had finished his horticulture degree and worked as the center's therapeutic gardener, using plants and nature to help patients connect with their memories and give families activities to share with their loved ones. And Victoria? She still ran her real estate empire, but differently now. She worked from home twice a week, took actual vacations, had friends, was even dating someone, a gentle professor who shared her love of hiking and didn't mind when she sometimes canceled plans because there was a crisis at the center. The center was named Margaret's Garden, and at the entrance hung a plaque with a quote Victoria had found in one of Daniel's notebooks. Words Margaret had spoken in a moment of lucidity. True love doesn't keep score, it just shows up and stays. Today was the official opening, and maybe 50 people filled the garden. Families who'd benefited from the center, healthcare professionals, community members. Victoria was supposed to give a speech, but when she stood at the small podium near the lilies, she found she didn't need notes. "My mother taught me many things," she began, her voice steady. "She taught me to work hard, to be independent, to never give up. But the most important lesson she taught me in her final months of life, when she no longer knew who I was, she taught me that presence is the present, that showing up is half of love, that slowing down isn't weakness, but strength." Victoria looked at Daniel, standing in the back with his nephew Miguel, now a teenager and volunteer at the center. "But I didn't learn that lesson alone. It was taught to me by a man who had nothing to gain except the satisfaction of making an old woman smile. A man who understood something I'd forgotten, that we all need connection, regardless of our bank account or career success. Margaret's Garden exists because my mother spent her final months being truly seen, not as a patient or a problem, but as a person. She was seen by people who chose to be present without expectation of reward. That's the model we want to follow here. We want to create a place where Alzheimer's doesn't define people, where families can learn to connect in new ways, where dignity and love form the foundation of all care." Victoria paused, looking at the lilies swaying in the breeze. "My mother used to say that lilies return every year, no matter how harsh the winter. That's our promise, no matter how difficult this journey is, and it's difficult. There's always the possibility of growth, of connection, of beauty, even in illness, even in loss, even in forgetting." There was applause, but Victoria barely heard it. She was looking at a woman in the front row, maybe in her 70s, who held the hand of someone younger, probably her daughter. The older woman looked around with that confused but peaceful expression Victoria knew so well. After the speech, Victoria descended to greet guests. The younger woman, who'd been with the elderly lady, approached, her eyes red but grateful. "Thank you," she said simply, "for creating this. I was drowning, didn't know how to help my mother, and I was so tired of hearing I should just put her in a facility and move on." "I know," Victoria said, placing a hand on the woman's arm. "Believe me, I know." "How do you do it?" the woman asked. "Be here? Work with this every day after losing your mother to this disease?" Victoria thought for a moment. "Because it's not about what I lost. It's about what I gained. I gained months with my mother I never would have had if I hadn't learned to meet her where she was. I gained perspective that changed my entire life, and now I have the chance to help other people not make the same mistakes I almost made." "What mistakes?" "Thinking that caring means fixing. Thinking that love needs recognition to be real. Thinking that presence is less important than provision." Victoria smiled, sad but genuine. "My mother didn't know my name in her final months, but she knew she was loved. And in the end, that was all that mattered." That evening, after everyone had left, Victoria and Daniel walked through the garden together. It had become a ritual. Every Friday night, they walked the paths, checked the plants, planned new additions, just being in the space they'd created in Margaret's memory. "She'd be proud," Daniel said, stopping near the lilies. "You think?" "I know." She talked about breaking the cycle, about someone finally learning to stop. "You stopped, Victoria, and now you're helping others do the same." Victoria knelt, touching the silky petals of a white lily. "I was thinking about adding a bench here, with a plaque. Something about how she always said lilies return." "I like that," Daniel approved. "What would the plaque say?" Victoria thought, then smiled. "How about, for Margaret, who taught us that there's always next spring, always return, always hope, even in the coldest winter." "Perfect," Daniel said softly. They stood in silence. Then Victoria said something she'd been thinking for months but hadn't voiced. "You saved my life, you know. You keep saying that, but you did the work." "No," Victoria shook her head. "You showed me a different path. You gave me your notebooks. You had patience with me when I was arrogant and blind. You taught me that care isn't something you can outsource or buy. It's something you have to show up and do repeatedly, even when it's hard." Daniel considered this. "Maybe we saved each other then. Because being with Donna Margaret, teaching you, creating this place, it healed me as much as it healed you, gave me purpose again." Victoria stood, brushing dirt from her hands. She would have loved this, seeing how a morning coffee turned into all of this. "She knows," Daniel said with certainty. "Somehow, she knows." And in the gentle spring breeze, with the scent of lilies filling the air, Victoria chose to believe he was right, because some connections transcend memory. Some loves survive forgetting. And sometimes the greatest transformations come not from grand gestures or fortune spent, but from simple repeated choices. To show up, to stay, and to be present where you are, with who you are, for as long as you have. Margaret had taught Victoria that through absence. Daniel had demonstrated it through presence. And now Victoria was passing the lesson forward, creating a garden where others could learn the same truth. Love doesn't need recognition to be real. Presence doesn't need reciprocation to have value. And showing up, simply showing up consistently without expectations, is sometimes the most revolutionary act of all. The end. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to reflect. Who in your life needs your presence, not your presence? Margaret's story reminds us that the greatest gift we can give isn't found in stores or bank accounts. It's found in the simple act of showing up, of sitting down, of staying. Maybe you have a parent who's aging, a grandparent in a care facility, or even a friend who's been carrying a heavy burden alone. This is your sign to reach out, to visit, to just be there, even if you don't have all the answers. And if you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia right now, know this: you're not alone. Your presence matters more than you realize. Every moment you show up, every time you choose to stay, that's love in its purest form. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it. Share it with someone who needs this reminder. Subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. And tell me, from which corner of America or the world are you watching? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Until the next video.